empty. Shall we fix that? Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and I live in a new apartment. My bookshelves have literally just gone up, so it is now about time to start putting some books on them. I thought this might also be a good opportunity to show you what books I have, whether they're on my TBR or whether I've actually read them yet. So let's go through the entire list while I put everything on my bookshelf. Up first is the newest edition, so new that the receipt is actually still in there. This is The Wedding Crasher by Mia Soso. This was recommended to me by Brianna from Four Paws in a Book. She said it was just as good, if not better, than Delilah Green Doesn't Care, a book that both of us have read and loved this year. So when I was in the shop recently, I had to. I had no option. I had to. So this one is pink, and they go somewhere down at the bottom. Homework by Julie Andrews. This was a gift from Victoria, from what Victoria read. I got it when I was going through a little bit of a funk in life. I read it in June, and it's a really gorgeous story of Julia's life from when she was filming Mary Poppins up to maybe the mid to late 1980s. This is a tiny little kind of introduction to Berlin, things that you can do in Berlin. I got this when I left a job that I was working back in Dortmund. I haven't actually gone through it, but I think it has something like 101 suggestions of what you can do on a day in Berlin. So maybe one day I'm just gonna close my eyes, open a page, and do whatever it tells me to do. This is the first of the Babysitters Club specials that I have. This one is California Girls, and it follows the babysitters as they go out to visit Dawn, who has moved back to California to live with her dad and her little brother Jeff. This is the Adulting Manual by Millie Smith. This was given to me as an ARC, and I actually have not read it yet, but it's really cleverly illustrated. It's got such bright and vibrant colors. It's got kind of ideas of like what to do when you're running out of money, how to keep yourself entertained in the evening, and I think that that is going to be a really great one to dip in and out of every now and then. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I read a NetGalley copy of this, but I knew that I absolutely had to have a copy of it for myself. So when I was around this month for my birthday, I went and picked up a copy. The other Babysitters Club special, this is New York, New York. And again, they're going to visit one of the other members. They are going to visit Stacy, who has moved back to New York with her family. Shagged, Married and Annoyed by Kristen Rosie Ramsey is the book that is based on their hit podcast about parenting, about their lives together, about relationships, about marriage, compromise. And I haven't read it yet, but I'm waiting for the day to just sit back with a cup of tea and fall in love with this one. The Day We Meet Again by Miranda Dickinson is a book that I got as a gift from a friend of mine, I think around this time last year. I was just browsing through her bookshelves and she said, listen, take whatever catches your fancy. This will be my first Miranda Dickinson, and I am really excited to see if I can gel with her kind of stuff. Get a Life, Chloe Brown needs almost no introduction. It is the first of the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert. It follows Chloe Brown, who has fibromyalgia and who's had a kind of a near-death experience and wants to kind of take life by the hands and just tick everything off this kind of bucket list that she makes for herself. She enlists the help of Red, who's like the supervisor of her apartment building, and they start to fall for each other. Because of You by Dawn French is another one that I have bought and I haven't actually picked it up. I think I got it around October of last year. I absolutely love Dawn French, but I've never read any of the books that she has written. So let's see how her writing translates for me as a book. Feminist Fight Club by Jessica Bennett is a book that I've actually borrowed from a friend of mine who has moved back to Denmark. And I haven't actually asked her if she wants it back yet or not, but if she does want it back, it's one that I kind of need to get working on. It's a non-fiction book about sexism in the workplace, feminism in the workplace, and how to kind of fight sexism and promote feminism in your workplace. The Appeal by Janice Hallett is one that I absolutely sped through one evening. It is a kind of a murder mystery, cozy murder mystery, where you are trying to solve, along with two law students, the whole idea of who murdered somebody, who has actually been murdered, why they're dead, and who knows more about this case than they might be letting on. The Guest List by Lucy Foley is one that I borrowed from my dad. It feels kind of spooky vibes, so I think I'm going to leave this one until maybe Halloween. But this is about a wedding that takes place on a small remote island off the coast of Ireland, and one of the guests is murdered, and you have to try and figure out who murdered them and why did it happen. I borrowed Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney from a friend of mine here in Berlin, and I still have not read it. It survived the move, mainly because it's hers, but I haven't reached out for it just yet. Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid is her most recent one. Carrie Soto is obviously going to come out in September of this year. But this follows the children of the Riva family, a party that happens at their house, a fire that breaks out, and all of the events that lead up to this event. A Funny Life by Michael McIntyre is Michael McIntyre's second autobiography, and it picks up where his previous one, Life and Laughing, left off. One of my friends has borrowed this from me. She loves Michael McIntyre's comedy and she said that this is hilarious. So it is definitely one that if I'm feeling a little bit down, I think I'm going to go for this one. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig is a kind of a parallel universe where Nora, who is feeling really down about herself and is considering taking her own life, she goes into this library and is given a chance to look at all of the possible lives that she could have ended up with if she had taken this opportunity or gone down this road or made this choice. And it's kind of an idea of showing you that life is worthwhile no matter what happens. Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness is their first autobiography, and it follows their early life, how they got into cosmetology and hairdressing, how they got onto Queer Eye, how they met the other participants of Queer Eye. I absolutely love JVN's energy and it completely shines through in this book. To carry on with that, I also have their second book, which is Love That Story. And I haven't read this one yet. I got it as a birthday present, which was just the end of last month. So I haven't had the chance to sit down and get through this one yet, but it is a very high priority on my TBR. Erin's Diary by Lisa McGee is a kind of a companion book to the series Dairy Girls, which was on Channel 4. It just ended at the start of 2022. I don't think it has anything to do with season 3, so if you haven't watched season 3 yet, don't worry, you're not going to get spoilers by any of this. But I absolutely adore this show. This was a birthday or Christmas present for me last year, and I'm really excited to curl up with this one. Now that the series has ended, if I'm getting that kind of nostalgia feeling or really want to go back and visit it, this is a good way to do it. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Hound by Charlie Maxey is one that I picked up last year when I was going through a little bit of a rough patch. It has got some beautiful illustrations. It's got some really nice words of affirmation. If you're going through a rough time yourself, I absolutely recommend that you pick this one up. It's not technically one that you need to sit and read in one fell swoop. I would say that you can pick out of this whenever you're feeling like it, but it is such a lovely and comforting read. Finding Freedom by Amit Scobie and Carolyn Durand is a book about Harry and Meghan leaving the royal family that it transpired actually had a little bit of help from Harry and Meghan themselves. I'm not a royalist, but I am very interested in Harry and Meghan breaking out for themselves, making their own lives, making their own futures, and I am a little bit intrigued as to what happened there. Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit is a collection of essays about catcalling, mansplaining, feminism, sexism, all of those kind of things that I am so interested to dip into. It's actually not that thick, it's very short, so it could be one that I might read in one sitting. Let's see how it goes. The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren is a kind of a special book for me because it is the first kind of spicy romance book that I ever read, and it was one that really got me into the idea of spicy romances, so it's one that I am going to cherish for such a long time. It is a TikTok darling, it is a BookTube darling, it can be quite divisive, but it's one of my favorite books of theirs. It follows Olive and Ethan, who have to go on their siblings' honeymoon when the two bride and groom accidentally contract food poisoning at their wedding, and the honeymoon cannot be cancelled, it cannot be rescheduled, it has to happen right here, right now. So Olive and Ethan go off on the honeymoon, but they absolutely cannot stand each other. Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton is again a non-fiction book about Dolly's experiences of romantic love, familial love, friendship love. It's also got some really cozy recipes in here for kind of like an apple pizza dessert, for mac and cheese, and there definitely are some recipes in here that I want to try out, but this book is so comforting, it's genuinely like a hug in a book. Again, Rachel by Marion Keyes is absolutely one of my standout books of the year so far. It follows Rachel from Rachel's Holiday about 25 years after she has come out of the cloisters for help with the drug and alcohol addiction. She's now living on the clean, she's got the straight and narrow life. She's actually one of the therapists in the cloisters, but a figure from her life 25 years ago is threatening to come back and throw everything into upheaval again. Thanks Pennies by Valerie Loftus is a kind of a love letter to Pennies, or Primark if you're outside of Ireland. It's one of our absolute staple shops. It's where you go in to just buy a packet of socks and then come out €75 less off. But it has a special place in my heart. I also went to college with Valerie and I know her personally, but I'm still going to check this out. It's also got wonderful illustrations from Kiriak, and I absolutely love this book. I Heart Hollywood by Lindsay Kelk is the second book in the I Heart series. Angela is sent off on an assignment to Hollywood to interview one of the new up-and-coming British movie stars, but she accidentally discovers a secret about him that nobody else knows. Crying in Hate Mart by Michelle Zauner tells the story of Michelle's life after she lost her mother to cancer, and Michelle's kind of journey to rediscover her Korean heritage, discover the food that she had missed out on when she was growing up. It's got a lot of food references in it, and I am so excited for this. Woman Eating by Claire Coda is a book about a vampire that, if you took the vampirism out of it, will just read like a contemporary literary book. This follows a woman named Lydia, who is a vampire, but unlike the vampires that we would know from Twilight, actually does have to eat blood to survive, except that she is living in London and animal blood is getting a little bit harder for her to find. It does have some kind of comparisons to an eating disorder, so if that's not the journey that you want to go on, maybe be a little bit more careful with this one. The 100-Year-Old Man Who Fell Out the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson is about a 100-year-old man who jumps out the window on his 100th birthday party and disappears, go off around the whole world. And I think it has some kind of a Forrest Gump vibe to it, in that he shows up at random moments in Sweden's history where you wouldn't expect him to be there, and I'm really excited to see how that parallel is going to play out. Then you have The Girl Who Saved the King of Sweden, also by Jonas Jonasson, and this is based in Africa about a young girl who saves the life of the King of Sweden and is then treated as a celebrity in her local community. On a Night Like This by Lindsay Kelk is Lindsay's most recent book. It came out in November of last year, and it's got a kind of a Cinderella vibe to it in a little way. It's about Fran, who takes on an assignment to go to a yacht in the Mediterranean, and she has to try and take care of the world's biggest pop star, who is set to perform at one of the world's biggest parties, the most exclusive and the most secretive, but the pop star isn't ready to go on yet. Fran has to then go and take place as one of the groups of the party, and she catches the eye of Evan, who is one of the partygoers here. The Heart Principle by Helen Huang is the third book of the kind of Heart Principle companion series, I want to say. This one follows Anna, who is a world-renowned violinist, but her career has kind of hit a slump. Her relationship is also hitting a slump, so they decide to open their relationship up, and that is when she comes across Kwan, who is the cousin of Michael and of Khan from the second book. How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie is not an instructions manual on how to kill your family. It is actually about a young woman named Grace who accidentally does kill her entire family and then has to try and cover it up and get away with the crime. Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers is about Grace, who has just completed her PhD, she's just completed her Viva, and she has gone out to Las Vegas to celebrate this, but wakes up the next morning married to a woman that she just met overnight, and now they have to try and cancel the wedding, but could some real feelings start to be entering the game? This is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This is the first book of the Crazy Rich Asians series. It follows Rachel, who is an economics professor at NYU and is going out with a man named Nick. She's going back to Singapore to meet his family, and she knew that they were kind of rich, that they had a bit of money, but she did not know that they are one of Singapore's most wealthy families. By Any Other Name by Lauren Kay is about Lainey, who works as a publisher and is sent to work with Noah, one of the publishing agency's most cantankerous authors who nobody has ever seen, and she has to try and chip away at the ice block that is his heart so that she can get his next book ready to go. Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty is her most recent book, and it is about a family of tennis players who are not exactly getting along. They are really great on the tennis court, but their chemistry, not so great off it. The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren is about Jess, who is a single mother and is starting to date around again on the advice of her best friend Fizzy, who is a romance author. Jess signs up for a dating app where everyone is matched based on how compatible their DNA is. She is matched with a man named Riva, who put the app together himself, and so to drum up a little bit more of a buzz about the app, they decide to fake date each other to make everyone think that this was just written in the stars. One of Us Is Next is the follow-up to One of Us Is Lying by Karen M. McManus. Here you have got the Bayside children again, and they are trying to come to terms with what happened in the detention room that day and help their lives go on from there. We're not even halfway through and I had to admit defeat and put my hair up. This is a Lonely Planet Guide to Berlin. Again, this is one that I got when I first moved to Berlin. I think it was a gift from a couple of friends of mine who knew that I didn't know the city very well, wanted some ideas on what to do. Of course, I haven't actually gone through it and I have been discovering things by myself, but like with the other book, if there's anything that I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do that day, I'm just going to flick through this. Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto is about Medi, whose family runs a wedding business. They also set her up on a blind date with a guy called Jake, who accidentally ends up dead in her car by the end of the night. Unfortunately, they are hired to take care of one of the biggest weddings of the season, so they have to put the wedding together and make sure it goes out without a hitch, but also keep this dead body on hide. Ayawade on Ayawade is about Richard Ayawade. This is a book that my brother gave me. We are both huge fans of the comedian Richard Ayawade, so he felt like this would be a good one for me to read. I haven't read this one, but I have listened to a little bit of the audiobook, and so far, I'm really enjoying it. Anxious People by Frederick Backman is about a bank robbery that goes wrong. Everybody is kind of held hostage, and while everyone is in the hostage room, they're kind of looking back on their lives, thinking about what they have done in the past and how they can make themselves better people. The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dare is something that I have seen floating around book Twitter so many times. I haven't actually picked this up, and my mom is the one that gave me a copy of this. She got it somewhere free, I believe. I have no idea what it's about, but one day I am going to pick this one up. Lord of the Flies by William Golding is one of the modern classics of our time. It's studied so often in schools, but I actually didn't read it when I was younger. This is about a group of young boys who are on a school trip but are accidentally stranded on a desert island, and anarchy breaks out. The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren is a great one if you really love romance books, but you also really love home renovation shows. I absolutely love both of these, so I think that is going to make this one a winner for me. The Comfort Book by Matt Haig is another of Matt's non-fiction books that kind of help you to navigate the absolute state of the world at the moment. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell is quite a dark book. It is about a young girl named Vanessa who discovers later on in life that the relationship that she had with her teacher was not as consensual as she thought it was, and was not as above board as she thought it was, when he is outed as a paedophile. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid probably needs no introduction. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It is an absolute BookTube darling, a book talk darling. Everybody is talking about this book. This is about Evelyn Hugo, who is a reclusive film star from the 1950s. In the 1980s, Evelyn hires a young journalist called Monique, who's going to tell Evelyn's story and tell her about the 7 husbands that Evelyn has had throughout her life and who the real love of her life actually was. Everyone You Hate Is Going to Die by Daniel Sloss is Daniel's non-fiction book about relationships. He speaks a lot about relationships in his stand-up shows, so I am really intrigued to see how that's going to match up when you're talking about it in the pages of a book instead. The Minute I Saw You by Paige Toon is Paige's second most recent book. This one follows Hannah and Sonny, who meet accidentally one day and just cannot get their minds off of each other and keep bumping into each other in really random circumstances. Fingersmith by Sarah Waters is actually the one that I was recommended to start with Sarah Waters rather than Tipping the Velvet. I've never read any Sarah Waters books before, but I'm starting to get a little bit more into reading historical romances, so let's see if this one will hit the bill for me. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller is a historical fiction. It is a Greek myth retelling. It is the story of Achilles and Patroclus, but told from Patroclus's point of view. It's got a lot of LGBT undertones, and I am really interested to see what all the hype is about. The X-Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon is Rachel Lynn Solomon's adult romance debut, and it is about 2 radio producers who have to pretend that they are exes to help bring about more numbers and more listeners to their kind of dwindling radio show. Sushi for Beginners by Marion Keyes is one of the Marion Keyes books that I have yet to read, but anything that Marion reads has been absolute gold for me, so I have no qualms here. Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon is another adult romance book about Ari and Russell, who are working in a TV station in Seattle and are trying to get their 2 bosses back together because they've been divorced, and Ari and Russell are noticing that right now the atmosphere in the station is a little bit frosty. This is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. It is set in a maternity hospital in Dublin in the time of the Spanish influenza. And as you can imagine, there is a whole lot of death, a whole lot of disease, a whole lot of heartbreak, but also there is a little bit of triumph in this book as well. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell is another huge BookTube darling. I have read and studied Hamlet. It's one of my favourite Shakespearean works, so I'm really hoping that this kind of fictionalised version of the life of Hamlet, one of William Shakespeare's sons who died at the age of 11, is going to be a hit for me too. Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce is about Emmeline Lake, who is hired as the consultant, who is hired as the kind of secretary for an agony aunt in a London newspaper in the 1940s during the Blitz. The agony aunt has suggested that every piece of information that's given out be very above board, very family friendly, but Emmeline notices that a lot of these questions could do with a little bit more research and a lot more tact when you're giving the answers out. This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It's one of the world's most loved and most revered classics. It is a story of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, who have probably one of the earliest enemies to lovers relationships that has ever been recorded. It's not a complete favourite of mine, but I do dip in and out of it now and then. When we're talking about classics, this is a lot more up my street. This is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott and tells the story of the four March sisters, Meg, Beth, Jo and Amy, and their lives when their father is off in the Civil War as a chaplain, when they are living in relative poverty, and their relationships, their lives after. Yours Truthfully by A.J. Pierce is the second book of the Dear Mrs. Bird series, and it follows Emmeline after the events of the first book. Obviously, because I have not read the first book, I don't know what happens here, but I am really excited for Emmeline's journey. Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given is a book about feminism, a book about catcalling and how women are viewed in today's society. I got this as a gift last year for Christmas and I'm really excited to open it up. Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren is one of my also most recent additions to my TBR. It was given to me as a gift by Daniela from Only For a Page. I have no idea what this one is about, but like Marion Keyes, anything that Christina Lauren has written has turned to gold for me, so I have no worries here. I Feel Bad About My Neck is by Nora Ephron, and it is stories of aging, of womanhood, motherhood, and I'm so excited to read it. Nora Ephron is one of my favourite directors from the 1980s and 1990s, so if this is any good as the 3 films of hers that I've seen, I'm in for a good one. My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey is going to be the 5th Tessa Bailey book that I'm going to try, and hopefully the 3rd Tessa Bailey book that I'm going to enjoy. This is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. It is about a professor who has short-term memory problems and can only really remember the last 80 minutes, and the housekeeper who comes to keep his house clean every single day, but has to reintroduce herself to him every single time she comes over. Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas is a prequel to The Hate U Give. It follows Maverick, who is Star's father, and he has kind of gone down the wrong road in life, and the journey that takes him to where he is in The Hate U Give that we see him in. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo is a book that is written in verse. I loved the other Elizabeth Acevedo books that I have read, with The Fire on High, which is written in prose, and Cat When You Land, which is also written in verse, so I know that I'm in safe hands here. A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann Ní Ghríofa is a story of Doireann's motherhood, pregnancy, childbirth, and also a connection that she has to an old Irish figure from the 1800s who she feels has not gotten any of the recognition that she deserves, and so Doireann goes out to give this woman a little bit more notoriety. Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata is about a young woman who is in her 30s and has worked at the same convenience store since she was about 18 and is completely happy with how her life is going at the moment, but does want a little bit more. The Shelf by Helly Acton is kind of like Big Brother meets Love Island in my eyes. It is about Amy, who goes away on a trip with her boyfriend and expects him to drop to one knee and propose, but instead he drives her to a television program where the women who have just been dumped by their partners are molded and shaped into the perfect partner for the 21st century. Then we have got all 3 books in the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy, but these are all in German. I feel like if I'm going to try anything that's in German, it needs to be a book that I'm super familiar with, and I absolutely know and love the story of Lara Jean, of Peter, of her family, so this is a great one for me to start with. I also have the To Hear 4 books that have been published in the Aisling series by Sarah Breen and Emer McLysaght. I see myself as a little bit of an Aisling, so all 4 books had to come into my possession. The Roommate by Rosie Dannon follows Clara, who grew up in a very well-to-do, very rich family on the East Coast and moves over to California to follow a guy who she has fallen in love with and has loved her whole life. But he heads out on the road with his band and in his stead has put an ad on Craigslist and is moving in a guy called Josh, who happens to be a porn star. Take a Hint, Dani Brown is my absolute favourite of the three Brown sister novels. This one follows Dani, who's a PhD student. She is working in a university and one day the fire alarm goes off and she is kind of fireman lifted out of the building by Zaf, who is the security guard there. And then everybody starts putting together Dani and Zaf and they decide, let's make this a thing. They decide to fake date each other to boost their personalities. But of course, sparks start to really fly. The Split by Laura Kay follows Ali, who has just broken up with her partner and is moving back to Sheffield to live with her dad. She's taken the cat that she and her partner had. And this is Ali's story about finding love again, picking herself up and remembering how good she is. This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay is Adam's diaries as a junior doctor when he was working in the hospitals of London as a kind of a labour nurse, delivery nurse. Parts of it are a little bit squeamish, parts of it are completely heartbreaking, but also parts of it will make you split your sides laughing. A Keeper by Graham Norton was so intriguing that it kept me going for an entire evening one day. It is about a young woman named Elizabeth whose mother has passed away. Elizabeth comes back from New York to Ireland where she grew up and hasn't been in such a long time to kind of close her mother's affairs up, but finds a letter between her mother and another woman that she never knew and a man who may be her father. I Heart Forever by Lindsay Kelk is the 7th book of the I Heart series, and this follows Angela again, who has just made a life-changing discovery and cannot wait to tell her husband about it, except that her husband is playing a concert 15,000 miles across the world. China Rich Girlfriend is the 2nd book of the Crazy Rich Asians series by Kevin Kwan, and it again follows Rachel and Nick and their relationship and how it has evolved from when they were in Singapore, and of course Nick's meddling mother and what she's trying to do to break their relationship up. The Summer Job by Lizzie Dent follows Birdie, who has just gotten a job as a sommelier in a high-class hotel in the Scottish Highlands. Except for the fact that Birdie is not a sommelier, that is her best friend Heather, who has gone to Italy in the hopes of reviving a relationship that she has had for the last 6 months. This is The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George. I bought this in a Little Paris bookshop and I felt like that was the perfect connection for it, but I haven't actually picked it up yet. There's Something About Sweetie by Sandhya Menon is the 2nd book of the kind of When Dimple Met Rishi companion series. Again, this one is about Sweetie, but I have not actually picked this one up yet. Roomies by Christina Lauren is about a kind of a green card marriage where real relationships and real feelings actually start to come into play. I think that one of the characters in here is Irish and I am very intrigued to see how that's going to be portrayed. Lying in Wait by Liz Nugent is a book that I am going to keep until October. It is about a woman named Lydia Fitzsimmons who is living the perfect life but is now caught up in a murder scandal. The Exact Opposite of Okay by Laura Stephen is Laura's debut book. It is about Izzy O'Neill, who wants to be a comedian, but is slut-shamed by her entire school when a naked picture of her accidentally does the rounds, and it really shows who some of her true friends actually are. Brooklyn by Colm Tobin is a book that was made into a film starring Saoirse Ronan in about 2016-2017. It follows Ailish, who grew up in Wexford and has moved over to New York, but is not really settling as well as she would have hoped, is still a little bit connected back to Ireland and how her family are doing while she's gone away. This is A State of Emergency by Richard Chambers. He is a journalist who works and lives in Ireland. He covered quite a lot of the pandemic from the start right to now, and this is his reactions to it, what it was like on the front line covering everything for the media, and some of the things that we as the public didn't know or didn't see already. Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake is Ashley's first adult romance book about Claire and Delilah, who have known each other since childhood. Delilah has moved away from the area where she grew up, has come back for her stepsister's wedding, and sparks are starting to fly between the two. Beach Read by Emily Henry is about January and Gus, who write completely different books, and because they are going through writer's block, they decide to swap genres and shake things up a little bit. So January, instead of being a romance writer, is going to write the next big thriller, and Gus, instead of writing dark books, is going to write a very sweet romance. Someone I Used to Know by Paige Toon is Paige's most recent book. It was published last year in June or July, but I haven't gotten around to it yet, so I have absolutely no idea what it's about. When You Get the Chance by Emma Lord is Emma's most recent book. It was published in January of this year and follows Millie, who is a wannabe theatre kid, and finds her father's old Wattpad or diaries and finds out that he knows a lot more about who her mother is than he has already been leading on to tell her. The Mothers by Britt Bennett is one that I, again, have not read, but I've already read and loved The Vanishing Half, so I have very high hopes for this one. Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo follows 12 different women with interconnecting lives in the city of London, how their lives all connect and how their stories connect, and also a snapshot at so many different lives in London that all work together like a jigsaw puzzle. People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry is about Poppy and Alex, who have been best friends since they met in college. They used to go on holiday every year until 2 years ago when something happened on holiday, and now they no longer speak. To kind of try and rekindle their friendship, Poppy invites Alex on one final make or break holiday. But is it make or break? 10 Things I Hate About Pinky by Sandia Menon is again another companion book to the When Dimple Met Rishi series. Again, I have not read this one. Ariadne by Jennifer Saint is another historical fiction book, another Greek myth retelling. Something Wilder by Christina Lauren is their most recent book. It came out of June of this year. It follows two kind of treasure hunters who have to work together despite the fact that they broke up several years ago and cannot stand to be in the same room since. Bear Town by Friedrich Bachmann is set in a small hockey-obsessed town in the north of Sweden. After a party one night, the unthinkable happens, and then it becomes a story of who are you going to believe, his word versus her word, and how much of a pedestal do we put sports players on. At Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert is the final book of the Brown Sister trilogy. It follows Eve, who is at danger of being cut off by her parents, so she has to go out and find a job for herself, and stumbles across a B&B run by Jacob and decides, I'm going to go in here, get hired, and see what happens. What I Like About Me by Jenna Guillaume is Jenna's debut. It is a YA book. I have loved her ever since she was a writer for BuzzFeed Australia, and I haven't read this one yet. Homestretch by Graham Norton is set in Cork in the 1980s and follows the life of Connor, who was involved in a car accident back then and is one of 3 people who didn't lose his life in that. And it also follows him having to leave the country for being shamed for his involvement in it. You Have a Match by Emma Lord is about Abby, who signs up for a DNA service and discovers that she has not a half-sister, but a full-blown biological sister that her parents told her absolutely nothing about. When she discovers that this sister is going to a summer camp, Abby also signs up to get to know her sister a little better. The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta is the story of Michael, who is young, gay, is into drag, and has felt like he has been repressing that side of his personality ever since he was young, but then heads off to university and discovers a whole world of colour and acceptance and discovering who he really is. This is Matilda by Roald Dahl, but this copy is in German. Intimidated as fuck by this book. This is The Bride Test by Helen Huang. This follows Esme, who is brought over from Vietnam as the bride for Kai, who has never had a relationship before, has absolutely no experience with women, but his mother really wants him to have a relationship. This is The Woman Who Stole My Life by Marion Keyes. Again, this is one of the Marion books that I have not read, but I have great faith in this one. And this is Rachel's Holiday by Marion Keyes. It is, to date, my favourite Marion Keyes book of all time, and follows Rachel, who has been kind of intervened by her family to come back home to Dublin and spend some time in a rehabilitation centre because her life is spiralling out of control. The Break by Marion Keyes follows Amy and Hugo, who have been married for centuries, it feels like. But one day, Hugo sits her down and tells her that he wants to head off by himself and kind of tour Southeast Asia and discover himself for 6 months. They're not going to stay married for this time. They're basically going to be on a break, and Amy does not know how to cope with this. Then we have got The Other Side of the Story, again by Marion Keyes, and again, one that I have not read. Again, quite a chunky book, but I'm very excited about it. The final book of the Walsh Sister series, and so far the only one that I have not read, is The Mystery of Mercy Close. I understand that this is Helen's book, and it deals a lot with Helen's bouts of depression and how she overcomes this. Stop People Pleasing is a book that I got as a gift from my friend Roisin for my birthday because she wanted me to stop people pleasing. Haven't read it yet, but I think I might be a little bit there already. How Do We Know We're Doing It Right by Pandora Sykes is a self-help book, kind of a non-fiction, by Pandora Sykes, one of the biggest journalists for women's writing in the UK at the moment. This is Animals by Emma Jane Unsworth. I went to training with a friend of mine one Saturday and she was reading this on the bus. She explained it to me. I thought it sounded so good, but I have completely forgotten what it was about. However, her description of it made me go out and buy it almost instantly. This is In Case You Missed It by Lindsay Kelk. It's her second to last book, and it follows a woman named Roz who comes home from having lived in the US for 3 years and discovers that her friends' lives have all gone on, they have all evolved, and she doesn't really know if she fits into the group anymore. It's called a breakup because it's broken. A friend of mine gave this to me when I was going through my last breakup. I read some of it, kind of dipped in and out, and honestly, it helped me so much. You're the One That I Want by Giovanna Fletcher is going to be the third Giovanna Fletcher book that I read. I have read Some Kind of Wonderful and Billy and Me and loved both of them, so I have high hopes for this too. This is I Heart New York by Lindsay Kelk, the first book of the I Heart series, and follows Angela when she first moves to New York and how her life is kind of exploding and evolving from there. Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan is a standalone book by the author of the Crazy Rich Asians series. I have no idea what this is about, but I was so stricken by the cover, and I know that I love Kevin Kwan's writing, so this was a hat to buy for me. This is Rich People's Problems, the last book of the Crazy Rich Asians series. I'm not entirely sure what this one is about, but I'm really interested to see how the series is going to close up. One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid is about Emma and Jesse, who have been together for years. They have been high school sweethearts, and they've just gotten married. On their 1 year anniversary, Jesse goes out on a helicopter flight that disappears over the ocean. Emma is of course distraught, but after some time she realizes that he wouldn't want her to sit around and just mope. She's gonna go off, redevelop, re-find her life again. So she falls in love with Sam, but one evening the phone rings and it's Jesse on the other end. Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellfleur, follows Elle and Darcy. It is a very much enemies to lovers book. It is sapphic. It's got kind of little BuzzFeed-like quizzes of what holiday drink are you based on your star sign that I absolutely adored, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the series too. Speaking of the series, I have the other two. I have got Hang the Moon and Count Your Lucky Stars, also both by Alexandria Bellfleur. I know that one of them is definitely sapphic, and I think that one of them has got a bisexual main character in it, and anything that has got bisexual representation for me, I will eat it up with a spoon. Forever Interrupted is another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I'm not entirely certain what this one is about, but I know that it is another kind of a romance love story. And I know that Taylor Jenkins Reid is such a great author that I'm not going to have any problems with. This is the first book in the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. It follows Nick and Charlie, who are two young boys in school in the UK. And they're kind of coming to terms with their feelings for each other, especially for Nick, who is just coming to terms with the fact that he is bisexual. Finally, we have got All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is Caroline O'Donoghue's YA debut, but she has written two other adult books that I've absolutely loved. So I'm really interested to see what this sapphic, tarot, witchy vibes book is going to be like. So that is every single book that I own, all shelved, ready for some new editions. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.